All right, welcome, folks. Today we're going to talk about the three major classes of pharmaceutical intervention that we use to help increase testosterone. So hopefully y'all can hopefully y'all can see my screen. Um, so first, let's chat about what are the three major classes. First, you can actually replace testosterone, TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. That's actually going to work by giving the body exogenous. So when we talk about testosterone being produced endogenously inside the body, and then we give it some from outside of the body, we say exogenous testosterone. HCG is going to mimic LH and somewhat of FSH to tell the testes to produce more testosterone. And then Clomid is actually going to work on the hypothalamus and the pituitary and say, hey, we don't have any estrogen. And then in turn, we release more LH and FSH. So before we dive too much into details, we need to know, how does this supply chain messaging system work? Okay, so basically our hypothalamus talks to our pituitary and releases. Again, we're just going to keep these numbers simple. These are not how these numbers are. We'll chat more about that later. But your brain says, hey, can I get, 10 of that testes and testes? Can I get 10 of that testosterone? So your brain, your hypothalamus releases a signal down to the pituitary, GnRH, and then your pituitary is going to release LH and FSH. So your brain asks for 10, your pituitary sends another message to 10, and then your testes produce 10. Everyone's happy. This is the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. And most of these drugs are going to be working in by manipulating this. Okay. So what happens when guys age is their testes basically stop listening or are unable to produce what the brain is asking for. And so ultimately what happens is you get this feedback loop that we see here, that you ask for 10 and you only get 5. And then what ends up happening is then your brain is going to increase the signal, right? One of the, as an example, it's just basically like a supply chain that says, hey, I want 10, you get 10, you ask for 10, you get 5, you're going to increase the signal and say, hey, testes, I asked for 10, you gave me 5, now I want 15. So things to consider, fertility. When we're using the different medications, we're going to consider which are better for symptoms. Now, we haven't talked about using quote unquote natural methods, diet, lifestyle. And mostly with my patients, especially when they're younger guys, we usually work on those things first. And sometimes we just can't get symptom resolution. But the analogy that I like to use is, you come to me and you're out of shape and you need to get from California to New York. Well, we can definitely work on things naturally to make you a better runner. You can cut your mile time down from 10 miles, 10 minutes, a mile down to 5 minutes. That's definitely doable. It's going to take some hard work and it's going to take a while. And it's, like with all these herbs in the diet and lifestyle, it's not going to happen tomorrow. You're not going to take an herb and change your diet and lifestyle and have your testosterone double or triple tomorrow. It's going to take 6, 8, 12, 6 months, sometimes a year to get your testosterone optimized depending on your starting point. But then I ultimately say, hey, why don't we consider giving you a bicycle? That's something like Clomid or Enclomiphene. It's going to help your body to produce more. So you're actually using your own body, right? Like on a bicycle, to get up to speed faster and get to a different distance. And then ultimately, testosterone's getting in a car. You're not going to be using your legs anymore. People say, well, I'm not, being natural. It's like, well, you need to get to work on time and you need to get there fast. So unfortunately, this is the world that we live in, and these are the options that you have. And I've never seen anyone become permanently infertile or permanently depending on TRT. Any guy that I've seen come off TRT that had their access and their fertility before they started normal, they go back to where they were. Sometimes they're actually higher because they've made diet and lifestyle things that make it easier to produce testosterone more optimally. And but ultimately you're going to age, and as you age, your testosterone is going to drop anyways. So that's why a lot of times we just go with, ultimately, hey, let's just replace it. So now let's specifically talk about Clomid and Enclomiphene. And like we said earlier, these are going to work on the brain, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary. And what, like in our analogy earlier, 10, 10, 10, everyone's happy. Clomid and Enclomiphene are going to block this. You're gonna tell the brain, hey, we didn't get that 10, we actually got 0. And then citrate, this is a selective estrogen receptor selective estrogen receptor modulator. It was actually, but then ultimately it's a weird drug. I have a whole other video on this that it it can modulate the receptor in different ways at different places. So on the brain, it says, hey, I don't have any estrogen. And on the breast tissue, it says, I don't have any estrogen. But then it doesn't do that on your bones. Because, for instance, if we didn't hit that receptor on your bones, you would get weaker bones. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is that we learned that Clomid works specifically, and increases LH and FSH. Now, what's interesting about both of those hormones, LH is luteinizing hormone, FSH is follicular-stimulating hormone, and we get these names actually from women, right? In women, they have these follicles, and that's in the first half of their cycle, and then they release the luteus corpus, and that's where we get the luteinizing hormone. So we don't even have these in guys, but it still does regulate the production of both testosterone and estrogen. And the point I'd like to make, and maybe some other practitioners or researchers can weigh in, is I don't ever see a direct correlation between like putting a guy on Clomid or Enclomiphene and their LH or FSH going up, and specifically their testosterone. Like what we're taught is LH is mostly for testosterone and FSH is mostly for estrogen. If a guy comes to me and his LH is 3 and his testosterone is 300, I don't see his LH go to 6 and then his testosterone go to 600, is what I'm saying. So I'd be interested to hear what other practitioners have seen. I just don't buy into the direct correlation of either of these drugs working specifically on specifically LH or FSH. And LH also in women, we look at this more for acting on progesterone. So dosing wise, this is all over the place. Some guys, they do as much as 50 milligrams daily. I've seen it 50 milligrams twice daily. I think 25 milligrams every other day is a more conservative dose that will probably get you where you want to go. What's nice about this is that it is an oral pill. This will keep you fertile, and it will keep your testicular size and your ejaculatory volume. Half-life somewhere between 5 or 7 days, and we'll talk about the difference between clomiphene and enclomiphene in a moment. So it does make this easier to do instead of injecting, and you can stop pretty easily. Like when we're talking about testosterone, stopping can be a little more difficult. The cons that I see is that I don't really see Clomid do that great about alleviating symptoms. When guys come to me and they have brain fog, they're fatigued, no drive, no libido, I don't really see a lot of guys get on Clomid like, wow, this completely changed my life. It does. I have seen it work with some guys. I think Steve Cook, who a lot of you are probably familiar with, the bodybuilder, talked about his experience with that, and many other influencers out there have talked about taking Clomid, and I just don't see it really help. And when I took it, like I make the joke, I'm like, what am I doing? It felt good when I took it the first couple times, but after maybe 5 or 6 doses, I was cold. I had like hot flashes. I didn't feel good. I was like, what am I doing with my life? I was really moody, easily agitated, and I want to sit at home and take a bubble bath. So, then I wrote down here PCT. And why I wrote PCT is because a lot of bodybuilders use this post-cycle therapy. When they're on testosterone, they use this drug to get their HPA axis going again. And I think they ultimately feel terrible, not only because they're using way too high of whatever drugs they're on, oxyandrolone, androlone, testosterone, but then also this drug they take, and then I think they actually compound how terrible that they feel. Now, let's contrast this with the more popular isomer of Clomid. So Clomid has 2 parts of it. It's enclomiphene and zuclomiphene. This one I actually like a lot more. If I had to take, I would probably never take Clomid again. Now, if like TRT and HCG got taken away, I could do enclomiphene monotherapy. I felt pretty good on it. And this is part of the drug Clomid that's been isolated. And if you haven't been paying attention, I did a whole video on the FDA doesn't really like this one. They don't think it's safe and effective. They want to get rid of it. So keep your pulse on that. You can still get it from compounding pharmacies for now. So keep a lookout. Now, again, selective estrogen receptor modulator works the same way that Clomid does, but it seems like for whatever reason, it works better on just the LH. Like I said, there's 2 isomers to this drug. Enclomiphene, which seems to work more on LH. Again, I don't really, for whatever reason, guys feel better on it. And I don't think it really increases testosterone more than I've seen with Clomid. And just for a reference, I've seen Clomid and Enclomiphene get guys total testosterone over 1,000 very easily. 1,200, 1,500 is possible. Free testosterone, you're looking at, an easy 10, 15 milligrams per deciliter. The sexual hormone binding globulin seems to rise equally with enclomiphene and Clomid, where within testosterone it drops. HCG, most of the time I see the sexual hormone binding globulin drop with HCG. So take that with a grain of salt. Now, dosing wise, we're looking at something like, when I did 6.25 milligrams every day. You can go as low as like 3. I've seen, again, doses as high as 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams a day. It's just going to kind of depend on your sensitivity to the medication. And like I said, I see better clinical outcomes using enclomiphene. And it seems like with Clomid, if you're taking it, you feel terrible. Like, you might end up feeling terrible for a couple weeks. And I think it's because of that long half-life. Where with enclomiphene, it's out of your system in a couple days. And so it has a lot of the pros that Clomid has. And I don't think I talked about this with Clomid and enclomiphene. Both, they stimulate your pituitary, and your pituitary sits on your optic chiasm. And the theory is that the pituitary kind of grows a little bit when it's stimulated so much, and it presses down on your optic chiasm and can give you vision disturbances, like changes in colors, floaters, all kinds of, just really random stuff. I did notice a little bit of floaters. I think when I was at 12.5 daily, I'm very sensitive in clomiphene. I got my test over 1,000, 1,200 with it. And I stopped. It went away in a couple days. I do believe I saw a research paper that people who had the vision changes and continued to use it for like 2 or 3 years, it became permanent. I've not seen that. I've not heard that. If you know of anyone who's have that, please leave a comment below. But it seems like to me, anyone who has these vision issues on clomiphene, you stop and it goes away in a couple of days. So that's Clomid and enclomiphene. Now we'll talk about HCG. HCG, like I said earlier, it's going to be working on mimicking LH, and that's LH is what talks to your testes to produce testosterone. And in our metaphor earlier, your brain asks for 10, you have your 10, and then we're going to go ahead and add another 10. Okay. So instead of producing 10, we're going to go ahead and produce 20. Now that 20 is going to go back up to the brain, and then the brain's going to say, okay, we got too much. We didn't ask for this much. Let's downregulate the signal. So then we don't get that 10 from the brain, and then you're left now with 10, and then you're left with 10. Now this is dose dependent, and again, these are just generalizations. I've seen different things in different guys. It doesn't seem like it always works this way. For some guys, it shuts this down, and other guys, it seems like it doesn't. Again, I'd be really interested to hear about your guys' experience, especially other practitioners, what they see that the HCG does. So HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, this is actually produced by in women's bodies when they're pregnant. This is what you do a urinary HCG pregnancy test in women. Like I said, it mimics LH is the way we're looking at it. Dose wise is going to vary. I do 100 IUs 3 times a week. It's just enough to keep my testicular function going. And I'm fertile. I've done a sperm test. If you're on TRT interested, and I have affiliate link below to do at-home sperm testing. And funny story though, these doses they're all over the place. Some guys, the theory is that because we're stimulating HCG versus like testosterone, that you have more 5-alpha reductase and you have more aromatase in the testes. So if you are endogenous, remember creating it in the body, you may get more estrogen and DHT. So sorry, I'm skipping down here. And that can be good or bad, for mood, for drive and motivation. So I usually just try and give guys, if they're running this with testosterone to remain fertile, I just do the least amount that is needed. Now, if you run it monotherapy, I think I saw a study at Baylor where they're doing like 3,000 IUs a day. I don't think that's necessary. I think most guys are going to be fertile at 250, 500 IUs every other day. And one thing with that, you would need to be mindful about the half-life. And again, I already talked about this. This is actually going to make you more fertile. Clomid's going to make you more fertile. HCG is going to make you more fertile. It's going to help with the ejaculatory volume and your testicular size, where TRT we'll talk about does the opposite. Now, the other thing to be mindful of is that when you mess your fertility up when you're on TRT and you shut this whole axis down, we didn't talk about this much yet. LH and FSH not only increase testosterone and estrogen, but they're also responsible for your fertility and creating sperm. And when you are on TRT and this all gets shut off, which we'll talk about, you basically kill all your sperm. And now and again, someone else who maybe researches this can give a more detailed analysis. This is just my experience and kind of putting the physiology together, is that I think about this sperm like a seed that you plant in the backyard. And when you go on TRT, you go out there and you basically kill all your sperm instantly. And spermatogenesis is 70 to 90, 120. It just depends on what source you're looking at, but most places are going to say your sperm takes about 70 days to develop. So if you wipe your boys out with TRT, you're not going to be fertile for 2, 3, maybe even 4 months. It depends on a wide variety of factors. So with that being said, though, when like if you've been on TRT and you get on HCG for fertility, you have to make sure that you're taking this consistently, because if you stop taking it, you're basically going to it's kind of like I tell guys, you put a seed in the backyard, you got to water it every day. If you don't water it for a week, they're going to die, and then you got to start all over. So that's why you need to be mindful of this half-life being 2 to 3 days. In my experience, I've had a couple of guys, they miss doses for a week or two, like they travel. And that does seem like it's enough that they basically have to start the whole spermatogenesis process over again. And again, that's specifically when we're using HCG with TRT. Now, we already talked about the pros then. You stay fertile. And compared to TRT, it does seem like you do get more DHT estradiol at similar levels. Like if you could get your testosterone to 1,000 on HCG and you get to 1,000 on TRT, in my experience, their DHT and estrogen can be ratioly higher. Again, I'd be super happy to hear other practitioners or other guys who've been running their blood to see what that works on, how that looks on them. The cons are, it does seem like it dose dependently shuts down the HPA axis. Now, with that being said, depends on what your goals are. So, and then again, I don't see it being as powerful as TRT for symptom resolution. I don't, one thing I often tell guys is, especially younger guys, we'll start monotherapy, we'll do an enclomiphene or an HCG. As a naturopathic doctor, our philosophy is you meet the patient where they're at. I'm not going to come in and, obviously if you're arguing with me, it's not like you're going to listen to me anyways. So, guys like, say he's 35, 40, he's like, I don't want to go on TRT yet. So we do enclomiphene or HCG first. Maybe we do that for a year or two. Almost all of them eventually end up going on TRT, and their feedback is, "Oh, doc, this is what I thought." Like you'll feel better. Most guys will feel better on HCG and clomiphene. And if I didn't have access to TRT, I would probably do one or the other. I feel pretty good on enclomiphene monotherapy, but ultimately, I feel way better on TRT. And most of the guys that come to me, symptom resolution is often a lot better on HCG. Okay, last but not least, we just go straight to the big daddy, actual TRT. So as we can see here, your testosterone is going to be replacing your testosterone. This is exogenous testosterone coming in. And so again, a way you think about this is that you had your 10, 10, 10, and then we added 20, right? That's going to go back up to your brain, and your brain's going to go, look, man, we asked for 10. That's too much. We got 30 back. So we're not going to ask for any more for now, right? So it shuts down your brain from asking. That's going to shut down your testes. And that's why you get testicular shrinkage, and it messes with your spermatogenesis. And so then ultimately you're left with 20. And again, these numbers aren't, again, testosterone milligrams per deciliter, you're looking at, at least 200 upwards of 1,500 to 2,000. LH and FSH reference ranges are like 2 to 10. So, and then, we'll dive into more nuance with testosterone replacement because you have different methods. So again, just to kind of give you a general overview, it is bioidentical. Your body cannot tell the difference when you have testosterone cypionate, has testosterone with an estrogen. Once your body cleaves the ester off, it looks exactly the same. People argue, well, the pellets are, that's not natural. And it's like, I mean, look, peanut butter is not natural. Peanut butter, go out in nature and find me peanut butter. You're not going to. You have to go and find, number one, if you want to get that many peanuts to make peanut butter, you have to crack, you got to plant a bunch of peanuts, and then you got to go out, crack them, then you got to put them in a thing and smash them up. Now, again, I know it's a jump. You get what I'm saying, that that almost all these things anyway. And I'm a naturopathic doctor. I want to stay as natural as possible. But what the term bioidentical means is that it's very, very similar to testosterone, and most of the injectable forms they're synthesized from yams. So, common dosing with testosterone like acipinate, enanthate, cestin 250, 40, 60 milligrams 3 times a week is usually where I start most guys that I work with. And then, we do blood work in 8 weeks and figure out where they feel better. Cream wise, same thing. We get a 20%, which is 200 milligrams per ml cream, and usually 3 clicks a day. We run blood work. So again, this is replacing your body, so it's going to go ahead and shut everything off. Half-lives of the half-lives of the injectables are going to vary, and trust me, people correct me all the time. So I just usually say cipinate's about 7 to 10 days, and anthate, I've seen it say longer, I've seen it seem shorter. Cream, again, super debatable, looking somewhere around half-life 4 to 6 hours, it seems like. The oral ones, there's a new undecanate, I think that's like 2 or 3 hours. The troches, 2 to 3 hours seems normal. And then pellets, you basically get pelleted every 3 to 4 months. They do a subcutaneous. I mean, it's a minor office procedure. You make a little slit, you throw in these little pellets under the skin, and then again, it depends if you're doing 2 to 3,000 milligrams over that 12 to 14 weeks. Just that one's even more nuanced. So the pros is, I mean, TRT works. It's going to be the fastest and most effective. It's getting in the Lamborghini, and it's getting to work. There are more things to be concerned about, and these are so controversial. I mean, just saying them, people will be like, "No, you don't have to do this." But we'll talk about them, and I'll give you my 2 cents. So, the cons, you're going to be infertile. Now, like I said, you can run HCG with it. I've had plenty of guys conceive while being on TRT. And again, permanent infertility, I've never seen it happen. I've never had anyone tell me it happened. I've never had a practitioner see they've had it happen. So when I think of fertility, look at all the major bodybuilders. They're all running gear. They've all, look at Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think both of them have 4 or 5 kids, and they're probably running stuff on and off for a large variety of their life. Now, I have H&H question mark. Testosterone erythropoiesis is the process by which we create red blood cells. And then it's debated, when your hemoglobin and hematocrit go up, do you do anything about it? Me personally, I have guys usually donate once to twice. It depends on where it is. It's not mandatory. I'm not like, hey, I'm going to cut you off. Number one, I think it's just a good idea to donate blood. It helps. I think most people should just donate blood once to twice a year. In general, I think it's good for society, and you're saving people's lives. And iron is inflammatory anyway, so why not just drain out some every now and again? When we think about, women are bleeding out and losing blood once a month, where guys don't. So I don't think it's a terrible idea just to donate once or twice a year, regardless of where your hemoglobin and hematocrit is. Now, on the opposite end, I wouldn't say go and donate every 8 weeks. I've done that where I donated too quick and I felt terrible. Usually, though, I do feel better if it's been 6 to 8 months and I go and donate some blood. I usually feel a little bit better. So that's a very individualized one. Hemoglobin and hematocrit. For me personally, I think when guys' hematocrit gets over like 54, I'm like, it's probably not a bad idea for you to donate. We can talk about that more later. Same thing with estrogen. People like, I don't use aromatase inhibitors. I don't like blocking estrogen. Will I use some diet and lifestyle things to help guys when it sounds like they're, feeling bloated, nipple sensitivity? I use it like, hey, are you driving and you see a dead bunny on the side of the road? They got hit by a car, you start crying. Like, it's probably an issue. I don't mess with DHT. I do not do the DHT blockers, and how much that affects balding and acne and prostate issues is again super debatable. So, and then the other con is going to be just the different applications. If you're doing a cream, you're gonna have to apply it a couple times a day. Injectable, you have to pin yourself. Pellets, you have to go in and get a minor procedure done. The orals, I don't know. I haven't been sold on them yet. This new undecanate one might do something. But as of right now, my 2 favorite methods are the cipinate injections and the cream. That's just what I have the most experience with. So again, wrapping up, here's your TRT, and this is just kind of, I'm putting them all together so you can kind of compare and contrast the differences in them. So now I know this is probably a lot for some, a little for other people. So if I miss some things that you think are very important, if I have some typos, please fill me in, put them in the comments below. And I'd love to hear your guys' experiences is if you've gone through these, like myself, I remember when I found Clomid, I'm like, oh, this thing's the holy grail. And then I felt terrible. I did some HCG monotherapy. I did some enclomiphene monotherapy. I went on TRT, came off TRT, went back and compared with enclomiphene monotherapy. And ultimately, I think a lot of you guys know I'm on TRT. So I would love to hear your guys' experience as far as using some of these medications and what worked or didn't work for you. Or did you have some of the side effects or did you not? Or, whichever. I always really appreciate the comments and, trying to use them to learn and trying to use them in my